This is the examination of the hidden human condition.
You're listening to the Hidden Killers Podcast.
This is the Hidden Killers Podcast with Tony Brueski.
That indeed it is, and we are talking with Scott Roeder today of Evidence Room. We are specifically talking about the case that surrounds Harmony Montgomery. Adam Montgomery is the father who has just been convicted on weapons charges, but he now faces trial for the assumed murder, disappearance of his daughter, Harmony Montgomery, who was missing for literally 2 years before anyone spoke up and noticed, and charges were finally brought. This guy's a real gem. The way the system failed Harmony is I don't want to say rather unbelievable, because we see these sort of things all the time with a system that's very unfunded and does not work very well. Maybe just answering my question right there. But Scott, how did something like this happen where the child was on CPS's radar and then she just disappears and nobody is the wiser?
Well, I mean, if we need any more evidence on why people suck, you don't have to look farther than this case. We've got a father who has no business, from what we're learning, being in the custody of a small child. We've got a girlfriend who is complicit in all of it. We've got a child that has just been washed through the system and is a victim of lack of protection and having unfortunate, parents. As I was doing a little bit of research on this case, because I really wasn't all that familiar with it, I had to hit the punching bag. I had to do a few sit-ups and push-ups, and then put on some meditation music, because it's so maddening that the system and the people failed this child in such a way. How does this happen, Tony? Only in a world that we live in today, I think maybe, to talk like an old person, that something like this happens. It just reminds us of how fortunate we are to, be born into circumstances that, don't afford us to, live past kindergarten.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a sad story where this girl really didn't have much of a chance. The best chance she had actually was probably staying in the system with foster families, which her brother was in a foster family. But somehow a judge at some point saw Adam Montgomery and said, you know what, you should have your dad. Even though he has this horrible rap sheet and track record, but he's more of a blood relative to you than anybody. I don't know why the son wouldn't have, her brother would have been considered just as much, but he wasn't. And the judge allowed this to happen. What gets me when you look at everything retrospectively is there's not any consequences for a judge that makes a decision like that. And this is just the one case that we know of with this specific judge. Yeah. My question is, how many other horrible homes has this judge put children into without enough insight? And the accountability is what I'm getting to. Do we need a system where, look, if you keep failing at your job and you're putting people into horrible circumstances, you should be called out. You should be removed. Is there... but we don't have that. That's not how our system works. Should we go to something like that? Something where we can hold people responsible for making these decisions when they're entrusted to be in power?
Well, I think, Tony, you're talking about a systemic problem throughout our entire country. What the situation here is the same thing that happens on every scale of things that are important to what goes on in the world. This judge, I'm assuming, is a probate court judge. And if it's like any probate court that I'm familiar with, probate court judges have to run for election and run for re-election, and they have to get votes to stay in office, and people need to challenge them. But as you and I both know, in a world where you don't pay attention to, the details of national politics, of war, and things like that to any fair degree, it's always slanted one way or the other. Now we have to pay attention to the judges too. It's just so much information for people to care about. And unfortunately, unless you're really engaged in the system, you're really not going to take these judges and throw them out because, people just click the name on the box that sounds familiar or that has some association with where they come from. Listen, I come from Cleveland, Ohio. Our judges are Italian, Jewish, and Irish. And it's been like that for 200 years. Yeah.
And I myself, I know I'm guilty of it when I go in to vote. I don't honestly pay that close attention to a lot of my local politics, but you get in there and, okay, pick which judge you want to vote for. I don't know anything about them half the time. What I do in those situations is I just don't vote. I don't vote if I don't know what I'm voting for. So I just...
the people that elect judges are particularly lawyers that work in the district where that judge is.
Sure.
So, if the lawyers aren't advocating zealously for the goodness of their client, and in this case, the client would be the baby, right? The state was intervening on behalf of the baby. And that means that the lawyers involved in pleading that case on behalf of the baby, on behalf of the child, and what is good for that child, the judge uses the information that he or she has and says, okay, give it with the blood relative, and then that's it. Because unfortunately, Tony, that's probably one on a docket of 100 that judge has to do every single day, depending on where that judge might be. It's a tough situation all around. I just feel bad for that child. And, but if we're talking about evidence of that case, they still haven't found the body. Yet they're charging him with, I think, what would be considered, negligent homicide, which is similar to manslaughter, where he was her custodian. She's gone missing. She's assumed dead. So he's responsible because he was the custodian. And I think that's about as far as they have as far as evidence against him. I don't think a jury of his peers is going to look at him very friendly. Come on. If I'm in charge of my dog and my dog goes missing for 10 minutes, let alone a child, you have to be a real kind of person to let that happen. It's just an example of the least of us being in charge of the most innocent of us. It's sad.
With a case like this, the presumption right now is dead. We obviously don't know, one way or the other at this moment. One of the first things that ran through my mind wasn't actually death. It was, well, these people are constantly trying to find ways to get money for their drug habits. Was she sold into trafficking?
Yeah, Tony. Okay, this just hit the headlines maybe 2 or 3 days ago.
Yeah,
and it's no secret I'm operating out of Cleveland, Ohio, for the most of my career, and I'm here still today. And from May 2nd to May 20th, there's been 30 missing children. Gone in Cleveland, just in Cleveland, 30 missing children in, I think, 17-day period, 30 missing children. And the police just came out where they have no idea where these kids have gone. They don't know. So is child trafficking a possibility? Yes, I guess it is. And it's just, it pains me to say that has to be looked into, but what other choice do you have in all of these cases of missing children, including this child here to these horrible parents?
30 kids missing. I mean, that is so, I imagine this is not a normal trend. Yes, kids go missing all the time, but to have that many
the sheriff
that quick.
Came out. Yeah, the attorney general came out and made a statement, a public alert a couple of days ago, and made this big announcement. But here's the thing. They don't even have pictures for half of these kids.
Is that because they have parents who just are not parents, basically, that doesn't exist?
Well, there's no documentation that the media or the government is using to even physically identify the kid, except for saying their age, their race, their height, and their estimated weight, and last clothing seen in. I mean, it's what's going on? I don't know. It's alarming, to say the least. There used to be this, and this is just an anecdotal story, but back when I think it was like in the 90s or something like that, there was this big program on saying, "Hey, it's 10 o'clock. Do you know where your child is?"
Yeah.
It was a national campaign. All the celebrities, Hollywood, music, politicians, everybody be like, "Hey, it's 10 o'clock. Do you know where your child is?" I mean, maybe people need to start thinking, "Hey, where's your child?" I don't know. It's hard to even get your brain around it, Tony.
It is 100%. And the fact that I think a lot of people, we hear about trafficking, we in news stories, and is horrible. Is it because it's not as obvious in front of us? It's not standing there holding a flag of, look, we're child traffickers, that we disconnect from it and don't really see or understand just how real these things are going on underneath our noses?
Well, I think partly that, and then partly the disassociation of friends and family and tight-knit groups of a community. Where I live, if somebody went missing, the whole neighborhood would be like, "Hey, where's that guy?"
Yeah.
But if you live in an area, even if you don't know his name, you're like, "Hey, where's that guy? He's in he drives that white Tesla. I always see him. He's not there anymore." People will wonder, like, what's going on? Why isn't this guy here? He's part of our daily routine. We see him every day. Mm-hmm. But if you don't live in a neighborhood where you have that daily routine, where you have a grandma, a next door neighbor, a paper boy, a corner store, where people are going to school and they're on routines, if a child never makes it into that routine, it's very easy for the community not to know that child's gone.
Sure. And make the assumption that they're fine or someone's taking care of them, and it's not my responsibility to go and ask, if you don't really know, like, where's your kid? That would in itself would be rather odd. But at the same point, it's the community as a whole, the world that used to be doesn't exist in so many places. And it unfortunately makes it very easy for children to go missing. And unless someone keeps questioning or keeps looking, it just kind of becomes another face that we see up at the end of the checkout lines.
Right. And the thing about it is, they even stopped putting faces on gallons of milk.
Yeah.
That used to be a thing, missing child would be on a gallon of milk, and everybody who bought milk would see that child. They don't even do that anymore.
No.
I don't know the answer to it. All I know is that check in on the people that you love on a daily basis, and what more can you do, man? It's just it's heartbreaking.
This is an examination of the hidden human condition.
This is the Hidden Killers Podcast.
The Hidden Killers Podcast.
With Tony Brueski.
Scott Roeder of Evidence Room, thank you so much for your insight on this topic. We'll, of course, be watching the Adam Montgomery murder trial very closely when it happens later in the year, and bring you full coverage on that as well. Be sure to press subscribe wherever you download podcasts so you don't miss any of the stories, discussions, and courtroom audio as we bring them to you right here on the podcast. I'm Tony Brueski. Stay with us.